All right. Wow. We're here. We survived. We are alive after our meetup and driving a good chunk across the country or flying across the country. How is everybody doing in the chat today? Okay. Today we're going to do a little Q&A about this guy, Lee Harvey Oswald. And before we get into it, I want to go through the same spiel again. If you guys would please say question or Q or something to tell me that this is in fact a question. Looks like Mark's mic just popped off again. Good times, good times.
Q.
There we go. I hear you. I hear you, Q.
Look, I don't know what's going on. It's one of those days.
He has a haunted mic, but I'm going to cheat and start with the first question. Mark, this is for me. You wrote a 5-part miniseries on this guy, Oswald. What made you decide, hey, I want to go ahead and do a script on Oswald as a subject? Why him? What started you down that?
It's weird. Oliver said that he was advised by people during his research for JFK that to not go down, I'm trying to find the right phrase, that going down the road into the world of Lee Harvey Oswald was a dead end, and it's just going to be a rabbit hole you're never going to get out of. And he was advised by various researchers and people to avoid going deep into Oswald in the movie JFK, that it was a black hole, Eric. So I thought, let's see what's down in that black hole. I mean, this is years after JFK. So I said, well, let's see what the hell's down there. You know what I mean? Like, I looked at it like, I don't know what he's talking about. What's the black hole? Because I didn't know anything about it. And then I start going down that rabbit hole, and I didn't come out for 2 years. So, and then he told me that afterwards when I gave him the scripts. He told me that story, that it was a dead end, but he just loved the scripts, and particularly because he's a female Asian fetishist. He loved the scene of Oswald making love to the communist Japanese exotic dancer, and which I think is in episode 1 or 2, I forget. Episode 1, which you can listen to on Locals if you become a member and follow along with the free script that Eric is talking about. But he was so turned on by the way, I mean, I wrote it almost pornographically, and he flipped out over it like some teenage boy. I mean, it was really, interesting. He was like a fanboy gushing over that particular scene, which to me was not a big deal, that scene in the movie. It was just him making love to, and I don't know if it was losing his virginity or not. I'm not really sure what happened. There's a scene prior to that in the mini series where they take him to this bar and tried to get him laid through these various Japanese call girls that were floating around after the war. And that doesn't go well. So I don't know if that, Ayoshi, I think her name was, I don't know if that was how he lost his virginity or not. But she was clearly grilling him for information about the U-2 spy plane. The black, they had a name for it, a Japanese name for it. But they were monitoring the spy plane from all around the base. The Japanese communists were every single day, every time it launched. So they were asking him questions about it. And to his credit, I think what was going on was he was plugging her for information about the communist movement in Tokyo. So it was both ways. I try to play it both ways, which I kind of think what was happening there was he would leave the base on the weekends, and he infiltrated college Tokyo communist circles outside the base in Tokyo And I think that was an assignment, looking back in retrospect.
Okay, and now we did cover that in our episode Oswald in Japan,
Right.
quite a bit of it. So if you guys want more in depth now, future episodes, we're going to be breaking this up in pieces. So probably we're going to be doing an Oswald in Russia or Oswald in the Soviet Union.
Oh, no, we're going to get even smaller. We're going to go Minsk, Moscow. I mean, we're going to divide it up really into subsections, because there's a whole separate section of just him in Minsk, Eric, as opposed to Moscow when he first gets there, which is a whole episode by itself. Because I mean, Priscilla McMillan shows up, and the attempted suicide happens. So we'll see. Attempted. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, like the big question of why Minsk and why.
Well, to answer that briefly, I think the Soviets did not want him to be in Moscow, that it was too difficult and too many secrets were available and too many things were available in Moscow. So they sent him to the hinterlands, which was Minsk. But he did the best he could. I don't think he cared that he was in Minsk. It wasn't under his control to go to Minsk. So he literally goes to the hardware store and begins to buy things and see what things cost and see how the cash register works and see how all the machinery of living in a city. It didn't matter. They could have sent him to any city. He would have done the same thing.
Yeah, it makes sense now. Let me see if we got demonetized already. Nope, not yet. So keep hanging on. Just lost your microphone, Mark.
Well, we'll see what happens now.
Yeah, you're on the computer mic. Let me see if I can turn up your volume. I can't hardly hear you. Let me see. Keep talking. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. It's just not going to change today, no matter what I do. Woo!
Yep, it's dead. I don't know what. Everybody is. Let's encourage Mark. He's going to get a new computer at some point. I have a feeling. All right. We'll just start off with the questions. Osvaldo Noda question: did he kill J.D. Tippit?
Did Oswald kill J.D. Tippit?
Yeah, that's the question.
I don't think there's any evidence that he killed J.D. Tippit.
I don't either.
You know, I mean, you got different ballistics. You've got a different wallet. I mean, he's got 2 wallets. They're trying to frame him for the job, and they find a second wallet there. It's kind of crazy. Ask Captain Westerbrook. Ask Captain Westerbrook who killed J.D. Tippit. It might have been Captain Westerbrook for all we know. I mean, it may have been a sacrificial lamb, Eric.
It could be. And we cover in the our first episode we ever did on JFK actually was J.D. Tippit a couple of years ago. And if I recall, there were witnesses who said there was 2 people, things of that sort. One of whom was short and heavy, and another one. There's Mark's discovery. You guys might want to check that out. Mark discovered something with a jacket that was involved in the J.D. Tippit case, tying it back to a gentleman named Larry Crawford, spelled Crafard. So it's, I don't know if it's Crawford or Crayford or Crayfard. It's really an odd spelling of the name.
Who, Crawford?
Yeah.
Well, everybody says Crawford. I don't know. They don't pronounce it differently. He spelled it himself. Spelled it differently.
All right. Jean Pepin question: was Oswald's body exhumed and head replaced to match dental records?
His feet were removed and they put on the feet of David Ferry. It's kind of interesting because they did exhume him. I don't know. His head was removed and they did look at the dental records. There was a British historian who somehow got this thing cranked up to where they did do an exhumation of him. He's right. No, Gene's right.
Okay. Well, I had no idea. Emma question: Mark, when did Oswald finally figure out he was the patsy?
I think we said this the other day. It was in the theater.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, I that's what I think, because he's in the theater watching. I mean, first of all, he's a movie freak. he went to every movie in Minsk every single day almost, and you know, a lot of people who love movies. I mean, went to that double feature there with Van Heflin, and got there at the time of the opening credits and trailers for future films, according to Butch, the manager, who was selling popcorn, and said he was there during the you know, future presentations of other movies. They didn't want to hear that, but that's in the FBI 302. That's a documented thing that Butch talked about. The manager of the Texas Theater, the Warren Commission, did not want to hear from Butch, but he was there pretty early, Oswald. They wanted to push it back to give him time to kill Tippit, Eric. So they wanted him as late as humanly possible in that theater. So they deleted Butch's testimony, or I don't know where it's buried. I don't even think it's in there. But you know, Johnny Brewer says he saw him going in there. Highly ridiculous. I think Johnny Brewer might have been helping the cops out a little bit. This is the shoe store guy down the street.
Well, now, question here from Reese Morris. I'm making my own LHO timeline. What is the best Lee Harvey Oswald book to read first? P.S. Great movie recommendation on Muscle Shoals.
Yeah, Muscle Shoals was good. Yeah, read the first. Well, the Assassinations by D. Eugenio. In that book, it's his first book. Lisa Pieces in there a little bit, but that was one of the first ones that D. Eugenio put out. So I would start with that.
Okay. And thank you for the super sticker, Emma. Now let me go back to the questions. John Lancaster, if Oswald was really a fan of Kennedy, why was he working for people who was his mortal enemy?
How many people are there? You think it's 3 people or 300,000 people, John? How many people? I mean, if you're working for ONI, you're working for an organization as a Marine, and you're brought into this ONI operation to become a phony defector behind the Iron Curtain. Who are you working for specifically? You're just assigned a job, and then you come back and you're a contract agent. Even for the FBI, you're a contract agent for the FBI being on their payroll, and you're a contract agent for the CIA. Who are these guys that you're, and I don't mean that specifically, but I'm saying in general, which people are you referring to? Because there's a lot of people involved here. Okay. You know what I'm saying, Eric? I mean, you'd have to be specific as to who you're working for, you know.
Well, especially when, I mean, the whole thing's very confusing because
I mean,
the same building is Guy Bannister,
right? And
you're pro-Cuba or anti-Cuba. You're starting we don't even. He was obviously doing some sort of game for somebody because.
Well, a lot of times they start these questions with a statement, like in other words, if he was this, there's no record that he was pro-Kennedy. There's no record of that. Who says that? Yeah. You know what I mean? You're starting the question with a statement that you're not sure that is factual. And even if it is factual, it's not relevant. Whether you're pro-Kennedy or anti-Kennedy, the guy had assignments to do, Eric, right? I mean, you're in the military. Did they ask you every time you had an assignment? Were you pro-Carter? I don't know what administration you were in the Army.
Thanks for aging me more. No, Clinton.
Okay, so I'm saying, did they say, were you pro-Clinton or anti-Clinton? Everything you did? I mean, it doesn't come up.
It's not relevant.
It's not relevant is what I mean. I'm exaggerating for effect, but it's not really relevant when you got a mission. They don't keep sounding you pro-Kennedy. You know, it's not like he was in on the plan and they said, what do you think? You're pro-Kennedy or what? I mean, he probably heard the ranting and ravings of David Ferry, but so what? We hear the ranting and ravings of a lot of people. It doesn't affect your job. You know, he had to go and do a job like passing out flyers with Ted Cruz's dad. You know, did he hassle Ted Cruz's dad? I mean, Ted Cruz's dad comes from Cuba. He's working with the intelligence people along with Oswald, passing out flyers on Canal Street. I mean, what happens to Ted Cruz's dad? He goes in another direction, Eric, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, he does. And just for an analogy, how many of you work for an organization? Technically, the president is the commander in chief.
Right.
I was in the Army. I worked for the president. He was the top guy in my chain of command. whether I liked him or didn't like him is irrelevant, just same way as whether you like the CEO of your corporation or you don't like the CEO. Doesn't really matter. You still have to go do your job, show up at work, and I did have to take an oath to support the Constitution. So I don't know.
That is true. That is true. That's a better analogy than mine.
MC question: why are there any lone nutters with all the evidence and all the other plots? Love you guys. True national treasure, or love you guy.
Well, I say that's why I compare the two, because they're the equivalent of Holocaust deniers. Like, think about this, and I compare the lone nutters to Holocaust deniers all the time. We were told as kids not to engage Holocaust deniers in conversation because they're then victorious, because you're acknowledging that they exist and you're debating now the Holocaust, whether you like it or not. It's the same thing with lone nutters. We're way past that. We're way past all the evidence of lone nutters. And they're like in the 1960s, stuck in time. We can't move forward. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, your mic is just making us crazy. I don't know what to do here. Question: why wasn't his police interview taped or recorded?
It probably was. Next question.
Okay. Have you ever found anything about that, or any?
No, I assume it was. What's the big deal? I mean, the fact that they're not going to release it doesn't change the fact that it didn't happen.
Is that part of the assassination records, or would that be a local recording that's being held? And
no. I mean, I'm assuming that when Captain Fritz was interviewing him, he took notes on the interview.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why would he not take notes? There's no harm in taking notes, right?
Sure.
I mean, it was also standard policy at that point to use a tape recorder, right?
I don't know Dallas's policy, but
well, they said it was. They said it was. So yeah, why they didn't do it? I assume they did do it. I assume they did do it. They just didn't like what they heard.
Do you think it still exists, or will ever be released?
I think they got rid of it.
All right.
I mean, think about it. You're trying to come up with a storyline, right? You're trying to create a storyline, create a frame, create a crime, create a whole lexicon of terms and dates and places and guns and everything else. The last thing you need is a verbatim transcript of that guy. How does that help you? At best, you could cherry pick out of there something like, don't drag Mrs. Payne into it. She's got nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You could cherry pick a statement like that out of all of the notes. But basically, you're telling me the guy decided not to take any notes of the interrogation of the century? It's preposterous.
No, totally.
In my humble opinion. I mean, he says he didn't take notes. Okay. Yeah, I'm supposed to disbelieve everything it says except that.
All right. Thank you, Pamela, very much. Let me see here. Question: is it true that the day before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald left his wedding ring and money in a cup for Marina, or was it a rumor?
I think it was a rumor. He also had his Marine ring on him. I don't think it matters one way or the other. This is stuff, again, you're buying into lone nut storytelling. You guys got to get your heads out of your asses. Not you personally with the question, but I'm saying these stories are designed from the Warren Commission itself. They're creating a narrative. The Dallas police were creating a legal narrative or a framework to convict a man. In other words, going up to the 6th floor, taking that gun, wherever they got that Carcano, and wrapping it up with paper and coming out with this package formed around the gun, although the gun wasn't in it. That package was built and designed up there on the 6th floor with the paper that was up there. Nobody saw that package going in, that gigantic gun package that they come out with. Nobody ever saw that going in there. They said maybe he assembled his rifle with a dime or a nickel while waiting to shoot the president. That's insane. We know that Bonnie Ray Williams ate lunch in the sniper's nest and they reconfigured the boxes. Why do we know that? Because we've seen photos of reconfigurations of the boxes. Each group has a different purpose. The Dallas police are framing a man. They did this all the time. If you want to see it again, you could see it in Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris. You could see how Gus Rose does it with the victim in that movie, and I think that's 1981-ish. Same detective who had to flip Frazier into being essentially a whistleblower, saying that Oswald brought the package into his car. I know it's hard for people to understand. This is one of the most big city corrupt police forces in the country. LA was just as bad. New York was just as bad. Some of them took years later to become more reformed. Henry Wade's cases were thrown out of court because of his corruption. I think 200 or 300 of Henry Wade's cases into the 80s were overturned because of his corruption. I'm talking about the district attorney of Dallas County. You're looking at this thing too black and white. This is a extremely gray thing with corrupt Dallas police people all through the storyline. And this division of corruption was a division within the Dallas police, and each big city cop, and people in New York could talk, cops that we know in New York could talk about this. Each big city police force had guys who did this dirty work within the force itself. There were guys within the force who were connected to intelligence. When you look at the RFK case, which we will look into a little deeper later on in the year, probably. When you look into that, you see Manny Pena and you see Hernandez, Sergeant Hernandez, have CIA connections within the with the Los Angeles intelligence unit, and they're designed to frame people for the CIA. That was shown in the CIA Sirhan case. With the RFK case, each big city police force has these little pockets of people doing things for different other groups at the time. You saw it in the Marilyn Monroe case. You see it in various cases. In this case, Westerbrook was the guy. Captain Westerbrook shows up at the Tippit murder site, says, I found a wallet, I found a coat, they belong to Oswald. Hard to do when he's got his own wallet on him when he's arrested a little later at the Texas Theater. How did he get the other wallet? That's part of the framing. They're framing a guy. And you say, well, how could they have done it so quickly? They couldn't have. It was done before the event. And you say, well, how did they know they were going to kill Tippit? I suggest that they knew they were going to kill Tippit and frame Oswald for the Tippit killing, because them showing up at the site of the Tippit murder with a jacket, which turned out not to be Oswald anyway, and Oswald's phony wallet is indicative that they were intending to frame Oswald for the Tippit murder, Eric.
Well, fair enough. Now, one thing I just looked up, Dallas was one of the largest cities in America at the time. So it definitely was a big city corruption type of thing. I just looked now. In 1960, it was the 14th largest city in the country. It's probably gotten even bigger as of now. I think it's number 4 or 5 in terms of like the radio district market size. I forget what it was. So just so folks understand that, I think that it was maybe even more significant, but it was big. Now I have a question. What was the situation between Oswald and Marina? Were they estranged, or was he just living in the boarding house for convenience to work?
Oh, okay. So you've got the situation where Marina has hooked up with her doppelganger, who is Ruth Payne. They're working each other. Again, Marina has her own assignments. Ruth Payne has her assignments. It's very similar to what I talked about earlier. These relationships are going back and forth like Ayoshi and Oswald in Japan. They're both trying to get information out of one another. It's a cat and mouse game between Marina and Ruth Payne. Oswald is hooked up with Michael Payne, right? Which we forget, Eric, and he's going around to General Walker's rallies. He's going around to ACLU meetings. He's infiltrating things with anti-Castro Cubans with Michael Payne. And they have a cat and mouse game going on between the two of them. So who's pulling whose chain? You don't really know at a given moment, but that's the world of espionage, Eric, right? That's the world of espionage. That's what I mean. Is you don't know who's on whose side. I mean, he doesn't know everything about Michael Payne. He knows some things about Michael Payne, and the same thing with Marina and Ruth Payne. They're working each other. She wants her to live with her. Oswald's got stuff to do. Did they? They have like a phony marriage. It's a real marriage. Look at the show The Americans, which I think was on FX for a number of years.
Yeah, I actually interviewed one of the consultants for the show, Jack Barsky, because I talked to him because he was a long living mole here in the United States.
Right. I mean, that's what they previously had was moles coming over here who had hitched a ride on the back of soldiers who had been overseas and got divorced through phony domestic squabbles. And as I said in a previous episode, these 13 phony defectors were told that the American intelligence people were hip to this thing and they weren't going to tolerate it anymore, according to multiple sources.
Wasn't Angleton was really?
Yeah, it was Angleton who ran this thing, who created, because he was in charge of foreign intelligence or counterintelligence, as it was. I mean, he was obsessed with moles himself, but that drove him to drink out of his mind. But this is years before when he creates this phony defector program, and the Soviets were laughing about it, saying, which is in the script, the Soviets saying, "Look how many people are fed up with Coca-Cola all of a sudden," because they saw this, 900% increase in defectors of military-age men overnight, Eric. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on. When 13 military-age guys in the United States are all of a sudden fed up with the United States and defect to the Soviet Union and satellite countries of the Soviet Union. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and do you think that's even more of the game? They're kind of like, well, let them on in. Let's see what they're looking for. Let's see what they're.
I think it's both, but I think from our point of view, we gathered human intelligence through those sources that we didn't have before, because there was no Telstar, there was no on the ground intelligence. I mean, Oswald literally had to go and write in his diary how everything worked, which is what the other 12 guys did, presumably. They wanted to know how everything worked. There's only one way to do that. And that is to drop somebody into that society and have them go about their business. How does the phone work? How do you buy a newspaper? How does the subway work? Everybody takes this shit for granted, but that's what he had to do and write in his diary and bring back, to his bosses. And so did the other 12. And they had their guys. That's what Marina's doing. Marina's gathering magazines and mailing them back to Minsk. And I don't mean glamour magazines. I'm talking about Scientific American, Science Magazine, high-tech automotive magazines, machine magazines. She wasn't mailing back, Playgirl. She was, sending back stuff that she had to gather physically that they couldn't. And so it's a two-way street.
Do you think, again, I'm talking to Barsky and his background. Before he came here, he was from East Germany. He went to Moscow, and they had like fake U.S. towns set up.
We had the same thing.
And there were exiles there, or people had defected, actual Americans staffing those towns to train him. Well, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. I'm wondering, do you think Oswald was ever asked to do that or given the opportunity to be a part of a fake American town or training facility?
Well, keep in mind, he was trained at ONI and they took a side trip to the farm. So, the setup at the farm, there's phony towns there. And in North Carolina, they had, in Nags Head, they had ONI headquarters there for many years. So I assume that he went through the same thing that Barsky's talking about.
Okay. JS wants to know, was the theater he went to the most logical choice based on his house location and the events going on?
For him, he went there every weekend. So yeah, it's a logical choice for him. I mean, are you talking about them arresting him? That's where he went to the movies. It's like you going to the supermarket and you get arrested at the supermarket and somebody says, is that the logical choice for you to go to that supermarket? Well, that's where I go to that supermarket. That's the supermarket I shop at.
Actually, that might help to clear something up, because I've had pushback from people on the side and things. Now, they're all like, well, why is he the one who ran away? And I thought that they just sent everybody home. They're like, everybody get out of here.
No, again, you gotta get your minds around this. Everybody went home. They said there's no more work today. Everyone go home. and everyone went home. I know that's crazy. I know that sounds insane, but everybody in the building went home.
And he just said, okay, I'll go to the movies.
He went home and he went to the movies. And he did that on Friday anyway, when he wasn't going over to his wife's house.
All right. Thank you, UWTI IGH. And Gordon Braxton is a new member. Thank you very much. We do appreciate that. Mark Duffy wants to know, could JFK assassination cover-up happen today, open top car in Dallas, or would any successful assassination of a president always be cloaked in national security? Same possible perps.
Could JFK assassination cover-up happen today? I guess, yeah, why not? Open top car in Texas. Could that happen? He's wondering? Or
Probably
could it? Oh, yeah,
that probably.
That's not going to happen. Yeah, or any successful assassination, or would any successful assassination of a president always be cloaked in national security? Well, how many successful? We've gone through this, all the different presidential assassinations, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind, folks, that Reagan was shot.
Yeah.
Ford almost got shot. So these lines are not impervious. Somebody who's really motivated or having the right help could.
Or not even motivated. I mean, Squeaky Fromme was a nut. So was the other one was a nut. Sarah, what's her name? In terms of Ford. Mm-hmm. And then you got Hinckley. I mean, in other words, they're not high-tech Soviet assassins. Any way you want to look at it, whatever their motivation, whatever Hinckley, whether it's MK Ultra or whatever their motivation was, these are not the best and the brightest professional assassins. The thing with the JFK assassination, it has the aura and fingerprints of professional people doing this, as opposed to John Hinckley.
An operation. This is like a military operation.
Yeah.
A lone nut or somebody going in or let me see. GF Duffner question: was there another man arrested or taken into custody from the balcony of the Texas Theater? Saw it on a show that there was a witness.
Not that I know of. I mean, Oswald is taken out the front door and there's already a crowd out there. Apparently Johnny Brewer, I mean, there's rumors that someone else who looked like him went down an alleyway. I think that's just urban myth, to be honest with you. It's just my opinion. I mean, there could have been other people. There were other people in the theater, and I think they were let go. I mean, when they see him, they come in through the back door, and Brewer is with them, and he points out, or they say he points out Oswald. I don't know. I think they were looking for Oswald anyway. And they didn't need Johnny Brewer to tell them who Oswald was. They already put out a description over the police radio right after the assassination. So, I mean, Johnny Brewer is not going to do anything in terms of, Johnny Brewer didn't bring the crowd to the door. Johnny Brewer didn't bring the media to the door. Johnny Brewer didn't bring the entire Dallas Police Department to the door. This is a place where Oswald went on Fridays or Saturdays to go to the movies.
All right. Nain Rouge question: do you feel the ONI CIA are withholding information on Lee Harvey Oswald connection to them and his actual activity for them?
Well, just taking ONI, for instance, 1978, the House Assassinations Committee, they show up to testify and they smugly say, we destroyed our records on Oswald, go F yourself. So, yeah, I mean, they literally said to the House Assassinations Committee, we had plenty of records on Oswald and destroyed them all. In open hearings, they said that. So, yeah, as for the CIA, they've been fighting it tooth and nail. We'll have a show, I think, next Tuesday about a guy who worked for the CIA who claims to have paid Oswald, as a paymaster. So that will be the CIA's connection to him, which is much more physical. ONI destroyed all their records. They bragged about it. They were smug about it, and they told them to go F themselves. So there's only two sources. The Hosty note from Oswald, the James Hosty note, there's the weekly payments from the FBI to Oswald that may be real, and as a separate contract agent for the FBI as an informant, he may have been generating some money out of the FBI as well. So all three of them may have financial records regarding Lee Harvey Oswald, all three agencies.
All right.
Which would not look good, to the public.
Again, and this is a funny thing, folks, but it's not unheard of. For example, in Iraq, the SEALs, or even Vietnam, the SEALs worked with CIA. These, when you get into the spook departments or paramilitary operations, you will find that they work together, especially specializations like SEALs, bombing, putting charges underwater, different things. You have Delta Force and you have CIA, and they're all, you might literally have one of each on a team.
Yeah.
So it's,
well, not only that, how many times have you and I heard just in the past 10 years, some shooter, the FBI was following this guy. He was in their radar. They knew about him. Okay. Everybody says, well, what about that? Yes, we knew about him.
Koberger.
Okay.
The FBI was following Brian Koberger, the guy who did the Idaho 5 up and down the road, supposedly, because he went back to.
We've heard this in like 20 different terrorist or shooting incidents that the FBI was well aware of the person.
All right. Al Gonzalez, haven't seen you for a minute. Question. Mark is correct. I worked in the NYPD Intel division.
Boom. Boom.
There were guys who were closely aligned with CIA. The department stations them at posts around the world now.
Thank you. Yeah, no, Al's hip to this, having worked in New York PD intelligence. But we showed this, and it's also in my scripts about Manny Payne and about Hank Hernandez, who was a sergeant under Payne. Lieutenant Payne was CIA. Hernandez was sent to Costa Rica in Central America. Was farmed out with the CIA to interrogate and use his lie detector stuff on people in those totalitarian regimes in Central South America, and he ends up with the girl who he browbeats into saying that she didn't see Sirhan and a group come in, a group of people come in to kill Kennedy at the Ambassador. He browbeats her, and there's audio tapes of that which are available. People want to hear the audio tapes of Hank Hernandez using his lie detector machine for interrogation purposes. Al is right, and nobody knows about this shit. What I'm saying is another level in certain police forces who are just framers, guys who will come in who believe that this is the guilty person, who believe that this case is a slam dunk, who are working closely with the DA to make it a cleaner case. Plenty of these guys have lied under oath to convict a guy who they feel and may very well be guilty as all hell. And they want to make a tighter case. We saw this in the trial of Sirhan, with the coroner. We've seen this in a number of cases. They may be do-gooders. They may feel this is the right thing to do and have done it a number of times. But sometimes it blows up in your face. Sometimes it blows up in your face. And you get caught perjuring yourself as a cop on the stand, trying to do the right thing, quote unquote, for the DA and put away a guy who may indeed be a vicious murderer, Eric, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the motivation. I'm just saying it cuts both ways. It cuts both ways.
This has nothing to do with anything we're talking about right now, but when you talk about being on the stand, I just saw a clip of a trial that's going on right now with some guy on the stand saying, I need to get some water. I'm high as fuck.
That's funny.
I'm sorry. I'm falling out. I'm like, what kind of witness is this?
Well, last night I got home. We got home from last night from Youngstown. I put on the TV and it's like greatest court cases or some murder thing, and it's Colin Ferguson. And Al remembers this. Colin Ferguson was the Long Island Railroad shooter who shot up everyone on the railroad on the Long Island Railroad, killed a bunch of them, wounded the rest. But the brilliant part of the story is he defended himself as his own lawyer and cross-examined the victims in the case in court on TV. And I hadn't seen that, or it just hit me like a ton of bricks last night watching Colin Ferguson be his own attorney last night in a suit and tie, cross-examining the people that he shot.
All right, can we try to reset the mic again just to see if anything happens because of the echoing that's going on? I don't know if you can plug in, unplug.
Nah, I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm done. Let's just keep going. No, I'm done. Let's keep going.
All right. Dick Dickerson gave 10 memberships, which we deeply appreciate.
This guy's the king of all memberships, Eric.
Yeah, well, and he's trying to help out the show, which I really, really, I appreciate because he gives people memberships. They may want to stick around, keep supporting the show for a while, things like that. It's a great way to, share and bring other people involved. Let me see. Question: can we please discuss the curtain rods that Lee Harvey Oswald had in a bag? Did that really happen? Did they find the rods?
Was Lee Harvey Oswald's friend reliable? Well, if you're reliable, if you're Gus Rose, the detective who was interrogating him and coming up with a storyline. Yeah, I mean, when you read Wesley Buell Frazier's memoir, which I think came out last year, Eric.
Or 22, maybe.
Before he talks about working in a department store in high school in his senior year and the curtain rod department and shipping out curtain rods and how much he knew about curtain rods, how they wrapped up so well, the curtain rods, how much they weighed, the curtain rods, the length of curtain rods. He was an expert, Buell Wesley Frazier, on curtain rods, Eric. And that was what the Dallas police used with him to come up with his cock and bull story about the curtain rods. Because if you look to their mother's 302, Lenny Mae Randall, his sister, Frazier's mother, she said that Oswald had nothing in his hands but a 6x6 inch sandwich that he put into his coat pocket. The guy who opened up the back loading dock of the Texas School Book Depository said Oswald entered the building with nothing in his hands. The sandwich was in his coat pocket. So the only one with the storyline of the curtain rods is Frazier himself, and he is backed up by his own sister, Lenny Mae Randall, because they're threatening Frazier with the electric chair. He is arrested by Dallas police. He is given 2 lie detector tests, and again, keep in mind, lie detector tests are used as part of the interrogation. It's a style that Hank Hernandez used and other people in big city police forces use, not to get the truth, but to interrogate someone and manipulate them into doing your bidding and confessing to certain things or whatever you want to do. It's not a straight up lie detector test. So this was done to Frazier twice. He was arrested or brought back a second time. He was arrested for the murder of the President of the United States. He was told he was arrested by the president for the murder of President Kennedy. This is in his book, talks about it himself. Indeed, Gus Rose later is involved in the framing in Errol Morris's Thin Blue Line. You could watch that movie to see how the framing actually works. However, Frazier is so scared shitless that somehow this curtain rods thing comes up, and that story becomes the story of how Oswald got the gun. Because if he doesn't get the gun into the building through the guy who's giving him the ride, it makes the story more difficult. So it's easier to sweat Frazier. And don't forget, Frazier has his house searched, and according to them, they take out a 303 British Enfield rifle with a ton of ammo out of his closet. So I believe that he was a backup patsy, Frazier, and he was scared to death. So he did whatever they wanted him to say.
All right. You know what? That might have helped your echo. Well, let's see if this is better. I'm trying to tweak the settings on my end.
Okay.
And I just got to turn it up. But let's see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Frazier's like a Ruth Payne. I mean, he's going to take this to the grave. There are guys who have disappeared, and you say to yourself, how has this guy survived all these years? Where does he work? What does he do? Why is he this old, living so comfortably for so long? Why does Ruth Payne live? I mean, obviously Ruth Payne has some Bell helicopter, Michael Payne money, but these people seem to live forever, and they never seem to have a job. I mean, Ruth Payne gets kicked out of Costa Rica in the 80s by anti-war activist who sussed her out to be CIA. She's brought physically to the border and booted out. They have other assignments. I don't think Frazier has other assignments, but his number one assignment is to always be available for documentaries, always be around when their anniversary comes up. Frazier said his own memoir was written by the guy who ran the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Museum, Eric, along with a friend of his who emailed him questions that he answered by email. That's his personal memoir. That's how that was written.
All right.
Which he says in the back of the book, by the way. I'm not making this up. In his own memoir, he says he didn't write a word of it.
Fair enough. Now, folks, I have a quandary with the Mark's microphone situation. I either do
this microphone thing and just do the show and forget about it. We just ignore it and just do it. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I'm trying to get.
Okay,
get
well, just do what you can, but let's go on with the show.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
And I have to do multiple things at once here.
I know, but let's just go.
All right.
Who's Fitch?
Anyway, was Fitch asked by the Warren Commission why did he not take notes or tape Oswald interview?
Oh, Fritz. We have to have Google translating device. Why did not take notes or tape Oswald? I think there's an answer to that. I think he did say something that he simply didn't do it or something. It is strange. I forget what the answer was to that, but I think he denied doing it for some with not a rational reason, Eric. It wasn't like some rational thing. It wasn't. He just said I didn't do it. But I think when they drilled down, there was a history of using tape recording and taking notes in the Dallas Police Department, which would lend you to believe that they did take notes and possibly, I believe, tape recorded.
Right. I don't know if this is related to it, but thank you for the super chat. World War II Germans used Connecticut sterilization law as defense.
Wow.
They had been translated into German to become the Nuremberg laws. You are not a denier to verify the details. You find a connection to Yale. Okay, so that's not really a question. Thank you for the super chat. But
what is this? I don't even understand what he's talking about.
Well, I do know that
He's saying in the Nuremberg trials. He's conflating the Nuremberg laws with the Nuremberg trials. That's number one. So. Carl, you're conflating two things. The Nuremberg laws banned Jews from even going into a city park. Is that what you're referring to?
Right. And also, we know that Hitler and others were influenced by eugenics.
Yeah.
And here in America, he was a fan of some. But either way, Mark Duffy. Has Mark watched Octopus Murders on Netflix? Do you think there's a connection between JFK assassinations and Iran-Contra training camps?
That I don't see, but I try to watch the Octopus Murders on Netflix until they blamed the Jews, I think, in episode 3 for this guy's murder. And then they said that Reagan stole the election and tried to conflate Reagan into Trump, which is what I assume they were attempting to do with this Netflix series. But the book is good. Read the book. Ken Thomas's book on the octopus is really well written. So read the book. I don't know about the series. The series has their own political agenda.
All right. This question here, I think I have an answer for, but enough content to have another Oswald in Mexico City episode?
Oh, yeah, sure. Eric, what's the answer?
I think we'll have a David Atlee Phillips episode that'll talk about Mexico City, but Oswald wasn't in Mexico, so that's a very short subject.
Right, but he did go to Mexico. He did go to Tijuana with the Marines in El Toro when he was at the base. So there is Oswald in Mexico episode about Tijuana.
Okay.
Okay.
Oswald in Tijuana, but not.
Well, we could say Mexico. Oswald in Mexico. You don't have to be specific and paint Tijuana with a bad brush. Don't blame them. There was a donkey in it. There's a donkey in the episode, Eric.
A donkey?
I swear to you, there'll be a donkey. A donkey.
I always thought it was donkey. But
not in Brooklyn. Al, how do we say donkey in Brooklyn?
Oh my God.
I haven't heard donkey. No,
Everybody get that soundbite. The donkey.
donkey.
Let's find the donkey in Mexico.
We say donkey. We say donkey. Well, it's tomato, donkey.
Jeff Valentine wants to know, is there any truth to the rumor he tested negative with a paraffin test, suggesting he never fired a shot?
Oh, that is true. That is true, Jeff. Yeah. It's not a rumor. I mean, it's pretty established fact. That's in the Warren Commission. I mean, there are facts in the Warren Commission, but their analysis might be a little skewed.
JD Daly, do you think that LHO facilitated the shooters on the 6th floor by letting them in and blocking elevators and stairwells?
Wait a minute. That's what Meathead said, Eric. That's what that's what our favorite director said at the end of his show. Or at least he said it in an interview with what's-his-face, the former Washington Post reporter, who has a website on the assassination of killing Kennedy.
Soledad O'Brien? Yeah, Soledad O'Brien.
Soledad O'Brien and Meathead. And their multi-part, we're going to name the assassins at the end. He says that, again, a limited hangout. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do the shooting, but he says that Rob Reiner says that Oswald opened the door and let them into the 6th floor. After you, my friend, because then you have them linked together, which is what they want. They wanted to, the knocking down the conspiracy just became so problematic for the CIA that in their limited hangout, they began to, a number of years ago, say Oswald was part of a conspiracy. Oswald did the shooting with others. And I went, wait a minute, when did this come about? And it was kind of subtle when it first came out. And I remember it first came out in the early 2000s, where they started to say Oswald was part of a conspiracy. And everyone who said, no, we don't think Oswald was involved at all, Eric. But that's not what the CIA did. Their limited hangout was, and this is extended by Rob Reiner, a CIA apparatchik, working with, I think, 4 different CIA directors on this series, if I'm correct. 3 or 4 different directors of CIA help Rob Reiner and Soledad O'Brien, no relation to Conan O'Brien, come up with their incredible, we're going to name names podcast. And what he said was at the end was that Oswald helped them, get into the building and get set up on the 6th floor. You can't make that up, but Rob Reiner did. So,
well, Mark, doesn't it warm your heart that there's so many CIA officers, retired and otherwise, who are out to help us solve the?
Yeah, I mean, he was directed towards. I think John Brennan helped him. He had, I think, what's his face, the guy under Trump helped him. He had dinner with him. They're all very helpful. They pointed him in the right direction to their handlers who specialize in handling meatheads like this, to massage the storyline and give you the right information for your podcast.
All right. Gregory Kent Smith wants to know, question, did Lee figure out that Payne set him up? He kept trying to call her after he was in jail.
Okay. Well, he's calling essentially his home number where his wife and kids live. She's manning the phones and cutting him off from his own wife. I mean, I think he would have preferred, having been arrested, to talk to his wife, not Ruth Payne, but she's not going to let that happen. In fact, she says that he asked her to call a lawyer who was John App, the head of the ACLU in New York. And she said, oh, the outrage that he would ask me to call him an attorney, assuming that he was innocent. I mean, numerous documentaries, she says that to that effect, that she was outraged that this man would ask her to get him an attorney. This is a member of the ACLU, John Apt, but this is also supposedly a Quaker leftist who is angered and shocked that Lee Harvey Oswald would ask her to call an attorney to represent him. It's one of the great moments when Ruth Payne really lets her guard down. I don't know if it's in Max Good's documentary, but there's a number of interviews where she said essentially what I just said in a similar tone, that she was angered that Oswald asked her to help him get an attorney. I think he would have preferred if Marina had done it, but she would have needed the help of Ruth Payne anyway to contact John Apt. John Apt was probably one of the bigger attorneys in the United States. He was the head of the ACLU. He was based in New York, and heard that Oswald was looking for him, and mysteriously went on vacation to upstate New York immediately. Fled the city.
All right. Nain Rouge wants to know, was Lee Harvey Oswald chosen to be the patsy because he lived in Dallas? If JFK was assassinated in Chicago, the deep state would have just had another convenient patsy?
Yeah. Well, they did have another convenient patsy in Chicago. So, yeah, the answer was there was a guy, Thomas Arthur Valley, was the Lee Harvey Oswald of Chicago. To answer your question, I don't know if you knew that, but he was the guy who had been arrested for the attempted assassination, which didn't happen, of Kennedy in Chicago from a high building with rifles and plenty of ammo. He was brought in by intelligence units. This Thomas Arthur Valley. He was brought in by intelligence division of the Chicago police who arrested him in Chicago.
And there were others in other. There was Oswalds everywhere. There's a whole book on all the Oswalds.
Well, no, but just to be clear, what Eric is saying is there are patsies everywhere in these other cities. In Tampa had a patsy. There are Oswald impersonators, not to confuse the two ideas.
Right.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant
no.
All resembled each other in a.
But they're not lookalikes. Is what I just want to be clear. They're not lookalikes of Oswald. They're prototypes.
Yeah, very true. Question from Mr. Milkcake. Wasn't that false Italian Carcano rifle a kind of greeting / hint from the Chicago Mafia, or any other innuendo behind it?
Well, first of all, the building is filled with rifles. There's rifles all through this building. The Mauser was real. The 303 British Enfield on the roof was real. There was an office with a guy who had purchased a bunch of rifles. It was a salesman who was showing off his rifles. The Carcano, was a drop gun, essentially, if you want to make that analogy to a rifle drop gun that they put in there and then they brought out of there. So the reality of it is the Carcano, people focus on these things like the second coming of Christ, for instance. I mean, these are props, my friends. These are props in a storyline. Forget about the Carcano. There's a different one that's in the National Archives and the one the Dallas police have. Look at the one that's in the National Archives. It's not even the same rifle. Look at the one that comes to the post office box that Oswald never signs for ever in the post office box, and they believe that Ruth Payne may have picked up a package. The fact is that Oswald could have gone into any store in Dallas or Arlington, anywhere around the area, just said, my name is Eric Hunley, and bought a rifle in cash. Why do they need to do this post office box mail-in thing? To have a paper trail to frame him. You got to get your minds around this, people. He could have gone into a delicatessen and bought a goddamn rifle. That's how easy it was to get a rifle. Just say, my name is John Stein, and bought a rifle over the counter. The reason that it goes through the post office is that it involves the government, and then the client's sporting goods cutout clip and the money order. The money order is not stamped until after the assassination to show that it was cashed, the so-called money order for the rifle. All of that was to show a paper trail back to Oswald. It's absurd.
All right. Dick Dickerson is saying, I wholeheartedly support you too. And you definitely do with those memberships.
Dickerson, you're going to the America's Untold Story Hall of Fame in Lima, Ohio.
For sure. Woodson Payne is a new member. Thank you very much. And Tom Woolley, who we just saw on Sunday and Saturday.
Wow.
Thanks, Leslie, Eric, and Mark, for the epic Youngstown meetup. It was great to see old friends and make new friends. Looking to the next meetup. Thank you.
He was great. Thank you, Tom.
I
mean, we talked a lot of Oswaldian stuff, and one of the conversations we had was about Oswald being a contract agent for the CIA and other groups, like Clay Shaw was a contract agent. Clay Shaw did not wake up every day and work for the CIA. Clay Shaw had business to do. Clay Shaw went overseas. Clay Shaw had to run a trademark, but he was a contracted agent for the CIA, a guy who contractually did things for them in terms of providing, reports when he came back from Italy and things of that nature. I think Oswald, the question was Oswald a contract agent or a full-time operative? And it depends. And I said to the person who was asking me this, it depends what you're talking about. Was he O&I from the beginning? Yes, that was a full-time operation. You know, when he came back, did he do things for CIA? Yes, he did that separately, and he did FBI separately. So those are contractual things. You know, was he an FBI agent? No. Did he work full-time for the CIA? Well, we're going to find out next Tuesday.
Yeah. Corey Westmoreland. Question: did Mohrenschildt set up Oswald to take a pop shot at Walker to see how in control he was of him, then later teased him when seeing his rifle, saying, "Did you shoot at Walker?"
Well, that's an interesting theory. I've never heard that before, General Westmoreland. It's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched. I wouldn't discredit that. The enigma of the Walker shooting may never be resolved. Like we've said before, I mean, Walker is the one who, the day after the assassination, and keep in mind the attack on Walker happens in April of '63. November 23rd of '63, Walker calls up a German newspaper in Bavaria and tells them that Oswald tried to kill him back in April. This is the first time that anyone has connected Oswald to the shooting of Walker, and it comes from Walker himself. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, that Walker is the one calling the newspaper, claiming that Lee Harvey Oswald tried to assassinate him, and that's the day after the assassination. And that story goes around the world with lightning speed. So we don't know if he did indeed shoot at Walker.
And like, how would Walker know? Oh, you saw him? Or is there? Did you?
No, I always wondered the same thing, Eric. I mean, how would Walker know?
Yeah, that's just very, very weird.
I mean, also Walker comes from a rifle world, you know.
UW IGH. So they use lie detector tests, but no notes or recordings. Ha 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 ha. This is how we laugh our days away in the merry old land of Oz. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Rose. This is in a different police station, obviously, than the one in Dallas, downtown Dallas. But Rose is using a lie detector test and a lie detector operator on Wesley Buell Frazier twice. They brought him back. They had a cop driving him home. The cop gets a call on the radio to bring him back. They turn around. They bring him back. They lie detect him again, essentially browbeating him, saying he's going to go to the electric chair. They could have done the same thing to Oswald, you know, in theory, but they didn't. They didn't do that. So you have to wonder, why did they do it to Frazier and not to Oswald? Why did they threaten Frazier with the electric chair? Why did they grill him about curtain rods and come up with this cock and bull story about 27-inch curtain rods that fit under the your armpit, you know, to the cup of your hand? I mean, I think what they were trying to do was take that sandwich and make it 27 to 32 inches long. I think
Subway sandwich.
It's a super sub sandwich that he had tucked under his arm. Unfortunately, the straight edge FBI agents had 302 interview forms with Frazier's mother separately that said he had nothing in his hands when he got into the car, and a 302 FBI report with the loading dock foreman from the Texas School Book Depository who said the same thing. So there's two people who said his hands were empty, and two people, a brother and sister, the brother trying to avoid the electric chair in Huntsville, who says that he had a 27-inch package under his arm. So you could choose to believe either group. I'm choosing to believe Lenny Mae Randall and Frazier's mother and the loading dock foreman who said his hands were empty, rather than the guy who's threatened with the electric chair. That's just me, but you could go either way.
Okay, and I just was thinking the 302 forms and 303 was infield. No wonder it's easy to get all mixed up.
It happens all the time. The 302 is an FBI report. I think I said 302 for a rifle last week, but the Enfield's a 303. So every gun nut in the world said, "Hey, I'm not going to believe anything you ever say for the rest of your life, fat mouth." because you said 302.
Christine Syntax with $20. Thank you very much, Christine.
Syntax.
Paul Henreid, was General Walker part of the conspiracy?
Well, that's the $600 million question, because
And 2 episodes.
and 2 episodes on Walker. I mean, you're talking about a guy that had the best rifle team in Europe. And I mean competitive rifle team, winning the top award in Europe year after year after year. You're talking about a guy who was an arch nemesis of the Kennedys, who had been arrested and put into a straitjacket and sent to a mental institution by the Kennedys in Missouri. The guy's got means, motive, and opportunity. I mean, in spades. You know, they have formed a group called CUSA in Dallas, conservative, U.S. conservative, America conservatives, U.S. CUSA, and they are some heavyweight birchers there who are not Kennedy fans, to put it mildly. So, I mean, Walker, if he's not involved, had every reason to kill him anyway.
And I do really encourage everybody to.
Well, also, I mean, think about the day after the assassination. Walker and H.L. Hunt get into Hunt's private plane and fly to his hideaway in Mexico for over a month until the coast was clear. This is from both of them. They immediately flee the coup. Why does Walker get into a plane with H.L. Hunt and flee to his hideaway in Mexico for a month? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it looks bad. It is bad. And, Walker, as Eric and I pointed out, goes running up and down the Braniff flight, yelling, "It's me, General Walker. I'm on the plane," when they announce that Kennedy's been killed, and he gets his own stewardesses to sign his boarding pass to demonstrate that he had an alibi. I mean, it's a little much, Eric.
Remember, it's Edwin Walker.
Yeah.
It's Major General
Edwin Walker.
You got that. Edwin Walker. That's me.
I mean, he protested a little too much, or alibied a little too much, to get out of Dallas and be aboard that plane coming from Shreveport back to Dallas, where he had spoken to some right-wing militants there who may not have included Miltier. I believe Miltier was one of them.
All right. John McMiniman, another fantastic show, guys. Mark has an encyclopedic knowledge.
Well, let's see if we can go a little longer if we've got this sound figured out, Eric. If we can, because so people don't feel they were shortchanged.
Yeah, we're going.
Okay, all right.
Let's see. Trey Hameter, question: what is your opinion of John Armstrong's 2 Oswalds, 2 Marguerites theory?
I never bought into the 2 Marguerites, but the 2 Oswalds definitely. I mean, and if you want to see, one of the reasons John Armstrong's work is so great is for the timeline itself, the minute-by-minute timeline, which is more important to me than the 2 Oswalds and the 2 Marguerites. He has you could take either one of the Oswalds, but the fact of the matter is, what's the money shot for John Armstrong's book is the timeline. It's the timeline itself. Whether you buy into 2 Marguerites or 2 Oswalds, to me, I don't really care that much about that. But the timeline is a masterwork of efficiency, accounting for every minute of Oswald's life, and that's why it's a great work.
And he goes into like how Oswald managed to order equipment while he was in.
Yeah. But having that in a timeline for a whole book is worth the price of the book, and his work is masterful in that regard.
Okay, I might have a PDF to put on locals. I'll have to look for that.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
All right, Paul Henreid, question: did Eugene Brading have a lot of money a couple months before the assassination while serving time in prison?
No, but he did afterwards. I'll tell you that much. He did all of a sudden come into a lot of money afterwards. I mean, he lived large in Beverly Hills. He was part of the Beverly Hills. He was a member of the Beverly Hills Country Club, and he kept huge amounts of cash in his locker with his golf clubs. And one of the aides to the aides, I don't know, what do you call it, a custodian, guy who worked at the clubs, saw it when he opened his locker one day in the changing room, that he had tons of money in there. And he specialized in women confidence schemes of marrying divorcees or marrying women who were widows. That was his main game. And he was a polygamist who would latch on to these women. He probably read the obituaries, which is a lot of those con guys did. I mean, Brading's an interesting guy, simply because he's connected to gangsters, but he's also a con man. That's his thing. He's a high confidence con man. And then he's in this oil con with a couple of guys doing oil con. So it's kind of like, what was the movie with Paul Newman with the Sting? This is kind of what Brading's about, like these sting operations where they roll people on these really high tech cons, and then he would marry women who had money and leave them and go to the next one. But yeah, Brading, he's a very interesting character. He changes his name right before he goes to Dallas. He meets with H.L. Hunt's son the day before the assassination. He is in the Dow Tex building. And is, I don't want to say arrested, but what's it called when detained? I guess detained would be the word. And he pulled out a credit card to use as ID, even though he had a driver's license, which he had just changed the name on the driver's license to reflect this new name. Because like a lot of these con men, he had variations of that name, Brading, had a bunch of different names of that. And it confused Garrison. Because of the different names. Garrison got confused with him and another guy from California. But again, he is the only man linked to both assassinations. He is questioned by LAPD the night after, a couple of nights after the RFK assassination, because he lives in Beverly Hills and may or may not have been at the Ambassador that night. So he is the only man, people should know this, who was questioned for both assassinations.
And by the way, we have an episode on him.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Oh, okay. Then it's all in there. What am I talking about?
No, this is a great teaser. I mean,
yeah. Some of these I think are in my head. I don't even know we did these episodes.
Yep. We did one on Brading. We've done 2 on Walker. So a lot of these names you can dig in further. Beale Wesley Frazier, there's an episode on him.
Frazier just looks like a weasel. I mean, he just, dude, I mean, I don't want to, say anything about guys' looks, but if I was going to go to Central Casting and I wanted to cast a rat or a stoolie, I mean, take a look at that picture of Frazier that Eric has at that episode.
All right, David March, who's been a member for 2 years. That's awesome, man. Great meeting you two. I made it back to Canada.
Oh, thank God. I don't even know why you went back. You just should have stayed here. I mean,
we had several people who came from Canada.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
That one mother was trying to get her son out. It was like East Berlin or something. That psychologist, she was trying to get her other son out or something. I mean, holy crap.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you for being a new member, Turtle. Let's see. Corey Westmoreland, General Westmoreland. Question. I have a book draft titled George and Jean de Mohrenschildt, written by Jean de Mohrenschildt and Jim Mars. Have you seen or read this, Mark? Can't find a publishing of it.
I have not, and I have yet to see. I haven't heard that book, but I mean, Jean de Mohrenschildt. I was talking to somebody at the meetup about Jean de Mohrenschildt because she worked as a dress cutter in Zapruder's company right there at the Dow Tex building, de Mohrenschildt's wife. But she was a dress cutter. I mean, these people had regular jobs. She was a designer of clothing, Eric. I'm talking about de Mohrenschildt's wife, Jean, who was born in China, by the way. Her family was killed by the communist Chinese. Like in 1949, I think both her parents were killed. And her father was very wealthy industrialist in pre-communist China. Was killed by some of Mao's forces. I think a train was blown up. I forget. But she worked as a dress cutter in Zapruder's dress company, which was in the Dow Tex building, which is why Zapruder was right there. And the guy was asking me if that's a coincidence or conspiratorial. And I said, I think it's a coincidence. I think she actually had a job there. But again, I could be completely wrong. It's just my hunch on her relationship to the Zapruder dress company. Because she did do that for a living. People did have regular jobs. I mean, her husband, George Mohrenschildt, had a degree in oil and geology and exploring for oil based on his geology degree. But he was also working with J. Walton Moore, the head of the CIA out of Dallas, and is told by Moore that he's going to handle Oswald when he comes to town. So, I mean, not everybody has a full-time job working for these intelligence services, Eric. You know, they do have these covers that I mean, de Mohrenschildt had to go to school to get a degree in geology. They didn't just give him a piece of paper saying, by the way, this is your cover, you're a geologist, like some Tom Cruise movie. I mean, people did have real legends that were real and not made up.
True.
If that makes any sense to anybody.
Sure.
I'm going to split hairs on this thing. But, you know, there are people who have real careers besides working as an agent.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Barry DeHatchett. Question: how come no one mentions Sheriff Bill Decker? He was involved with the Bonnie and Clyde ambush. He's come up in an episode. I don't remember which one, but I know that guy has come up.
Well, Decker tells everyone to stand down. I mean, famously, and not get involved with any security whatsoever. Sheriff Bill Decker, and coincidentally, you know, happened to be involved with the Bonnie and Clyde thing. I think it's two separate things, you know. But yeah, Decker is an interesting guy. I mean, he's somebody who is clearly involved in some little part of the conspiracy.
All right, Pasha. Question: Mark, to paraphrase, you said there is truth in the Warren report. How in the world can we figure out all the crap to find those nuggets of truth?
Well, again, they're working backwards to create people don't understand that this is not an investigation by the Warren Commission. This is them painting a narrative, creating a full picture from their sketch into an oil painting. It's not an investigation. This is not somebody looking to get to the truth. This is them creating a pastiche. And there's facts in there. There's tons of facts in there.
It's a report to close the case. It's meant to be the verdict against a guy who never went to trial for the murder.
Like we said on Saturday down in Ohio. Look, this guy who alters the Warren Commission autopsy sketches for them, and as he said, for the good of the American people, he alters the sketches, moving the wound from the right shoulder of JFK to the back of his neck so it could traverse out the front of his throat. That is done by this guy for the good, according to him, for the good of the American people. He says this publicly years later, and his quid pro quo is that he is given the presidency, or at least the vice presidency, when Agnew is removed, and that's Gerald Ford. He will then become president of the United States. He will then pardon Nixon. He will then run against Jimmy Carter and lose, and essentially that's the end of his career. But he will be the only president, Gerald Ford, to testify in open house session, the only president in the history of the United States to ever testify in open house session as president of the United States, by the way. And we'll get into that later in a separate episode.
All right. Todd Gavin's been a member for 3 months. Thank you, Todd.
How's it feel, Todd? 3 months. You're in. How good is this?
Pete's Guide. Did Oswald have any connection with E. Howard Hunt?
Well, we don't know because Mark Lane in the Liberty Lobby case proved that Hunt was lying when he said he was not in Dallas on November 22nd. He indeed was found to be liable. There's a civil case, by the way, where Lane was brought on by Liberty Magazine, which Hunt had sued for defamation because the Liberty Magazine had said that Hunt was involved in the assassination, and Hunt said, I wasn't in Dallas and I can prove it. But when Lane comes in for the appeal, Lane proves that Hunt was lying, and he was able to do that masterfully in the case. And turns out that Hunt was in Dallas and not back in Virginia as he claimed. So he was proven to be lying there. Hunt will later surface in our next topic, which is Watergate, and you will begin to see the connections between these two mega historical events over a period of the next year.
All right. Mom's love is a lifetime warranty with a whopping
That's a
$49.99.
great handle, honey. Whatever that's about, but that's great.
Happy anniversary, Cheshire Cat. I love you. To the moon, baby. To my rocket squad Gramps from the heavens. I never joined the circus. Thanks, dudes. Mark and Eric. Keep being based.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
It is, but thank you very much for $50.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And then last question before we head over to locals. We have from Shubru. Concerning the missing gap in the Zapruder film, did Zapruder ever say he paused filming of the misturn resulting in the Kennedy?
Again, let me stop you
interference?
because it starts again with a false statement. All of these questions that start with a dude. I mean, I've been a journalist for a long time, bro. I understand false statement questions. There's no missing gap in the Zapruder film. Zapruder never said he paused it because there is no gap. But thanks for the $10, bro.
All right. Well, on that, we are going to be following our Oswald over to
Whoa.
locals and hanging out there. Everybody, I hope you consider joining locals. It can be free. You know, membership is free on locals. You'll be able to watch the rest of it.
Thing you did, the AI thing, Eric.
If they want to pay and support, they get to, have access to the entire AI. I'm encouraging everybody to get there, look around, say, hey, it's kind of nice here. And they consider being a member for a year. You get added content, documents that we have for members only. The Oswald, we're 2 parts. Part 3 is underway. Audio drama, available only for yearly subscribers. And it's a really great community.
It's a great community with great people. Some of them have criminal records, but that's okay.
And they get the special privilege of Mark just fixed his mic, and so you'll get to hear
it'll go out again. The point of the matter is that I think the AI Oswald thing, I'm mentioning because we're doing the Oswald episode, the Q&A. The Oswald AI thing that Eric has put together is just wonderful to follow along and read with the script. I don't care if you join or not, but you have to be a member to listen to it and follow it. And it's well worth it. I mean, it's $70 for the whole year, but the price alone for the Oswald experience is well worth the price of admission, to put it that way. This is a bearded lady with a real beard, and I think you'd really enjoy it. And I think we're up to episode 3 almost. We got like 2.5 episodes.
Right. Three is being finished right now.
Yeah. So I look, it's not, it's up to you. I mean, like Eric said, you can come over and look around. There's plenty of documents that we have, rare book PDFs, rare files, rare CIA documents that some are behind the paywall, some aren't. I'm not really sure which is what anymore. But this AI thing is really what I think people would really like who haven't listened to it yet. The people who have listened to it have flipped out over it. And look, I don't know where we're going with artificial intelligence, but Eric and I decided to use it right now for the 5-part miniseries that I wrote with Oliver Stone. And I think people would enjoy that as much as anything for simply joining our locals page. Because none of these other locals groups offers anything like this, as far as I know, Eric, right?
No, and again, we have a lot that's free, and there are some things that are paid. So there's something for everybody at unstructured.locals.com. I never want to freeze people out to not get good material. Just have a community where you go there and every single thing is you got to be paid. That just sucks. So there's a lot of content like the rest of this. We're going to hang out, answer a bunch of tips and questions on locals. You'll be able to see that. You won't be able to interact, but you'll be able to see it. So you get to have the full experience of the entire show. And I never want to freeze anybody out. And I hope you do consider coming over. And again, be there for free for a while and see if you like it.
It's like this YouTube, whatchamacallit, when we ask you to subscribe to the channel, it's the strangest thing because it's free. you know, and Eric puts up this little banner here. Remember to subscribe. I mean, I've seen other channels. They do it right out of the chute. They browbeat you into submission to subscribe. We're at like 108,000. I'd love to get to 200,000 before I die. You know, it doesn't kill you. And again, for the love of God, it's free. I don't know what seems to be the hang up. Some people have to subscribe twice because I understand YouTube, maybe if you don't use it enough, they take it off or something, right, Eric? If you're
I don't know,
dormant or something. But nevertheless, I urge you to subscribe to the channel and also to come over to Locals for free. Both of these are free, people. I mean, I'm not asking you to send us any money. God forbid we get demonetized the second we get out of bed now, me and Eric. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being part of a community that explores these issues in pop culture and crimes like this and other things that we've covered, including Rust in detail, including all these people from you know, Lord Buckley to Rodney Dangerfield to Henry Ford. I mean, it's a Jonas Salk, for Christ's sakes. This thing, you know, people think this is a JFK channel. It's far from it. I mean, that's Richard one of our
Tucker Carlson's father, Lizzie Borden. I mean, it's all over the place. I
mean, if you look at some of these videos, like the LBJ video series, it's in the hundreds of thousands of people who've seen these, and yet we only have 100,000 subscribers. More people have seen the videos than we have subscribers, like 100-to-1 ratio. So we would like you to subscribe if humanly possible. If you can't, if it's a religious thing like the Sabbath where you can't use electronic devices, there's nothing we could do. But we would like you to subscribe anyway. So,
well, if it's a religious thing, can you subscribe on the other 6 days?
The others, unless you can't ever subscribe to YouTube religiously, I don't know. By the way, I saw that interview between Don Lemon and Elon Musk, and that was kind of awkward.
Yeah, I'll have to check out later. I saw the clips. I mean, Don Lemon's just trying to milk that shit and get.
Woo, man, that was.
We'll talk about that on Friday.
Yeah, we'll talk about Friday. But I just wanted to. I just saw it on the plane last night. It was a little much.
All right. Well, everybody, come on over to Locals. Promise the water's fine.